today until the 31st, I have a special offer for 5 people if you want in on one of these.
She was very passionate about Scentsy, and her Facebook page was filled with photos and videos about her side business, including trips she took with others who sell the Scentsy products. Aside from that, Lauren was also an active member of Hope Lutheran Church and worked as a Sunday school teacher as part of her work with the church's children's and youth ministries. In her mid-20s, Lauren reconnected with one of her old classmates from middle school, Matthew Phelps. The two lost touch in high school since Matthew transferred, and Lauren's family eventually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. While Lauren grew up in a loving home, Matthew had not been so fortunate. Matthew did not have any close bonds with his family. He was primarily raised by his grandparents because his parents neglected their responsibilities. His parents separated after his birth. While his biological father was entirely absent from his life, his mother was also rarely around. His mother remarried a few times, but Matthew never formed a father and son type bond with any of his stepfathers. His grandparents tried their best to provide him with love and care, but there was not enough to fill the vacant place in his heart. This dynamic may have been what caused him to start acting out from an early age. Whether his living conditions affected his mind or not, Matthew started hanging out with the wrong crowd and began abusing drugs and alcohol in his high school years. Matthew and his friends were known to have often consumed quercetin, the same medicine that he was now claiming to have taken before attacking his wife. High amounts of quercetin cause a high, which Matthew and his friends took advantage of. This addiction began to spiral out of control, and as a result, Matthew's grandparents were eventually forced to take Matthew out of public high school and put him in a private Christian academy to try to get his life back on the right track. This worked well for Matthew. He started getting better grades in school and eventually graduated. He then attended the Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, and seemed to have significantly improved from his early high school years to eventually graduating college in 2011. It was Matthew who stumbled upon Lauren's photos and realized that they both knew each other. After hesitating for a bit, Matthew reached out to Lauren through Instagram. He liked every picture of Lauren that was ever posted. The two began catching up, and as such things often go, the texts soon transitioned to long, late-night phone calls. Before long, both Matthew and Lauren fell head over heels for each other. The two began a long-distance relationship, since Matthew was still living in Kentucky at the time. Despite living hundreds of miles away from each other, the relationship between them began to progress very quickly. It did not take long before Matthew made the effort to visit Lauren in Raleigh. Eventually, he moved back to North Carolina to be with her. Being so close to her family, Lauren was excited to introduce Matthew to everyone. Most of her family welcomed Matthew with open arms, trusting Lauren's choices. They saw him as a kind and well-behaved man who genuinely cared for their daughter. Lauren's mother, Lori, thought him to be the perfect fit for her daughter. However, Lauren's father, Dale, was skeptical about the relationship. Perhaps it was just a father's protectiveness for his daughter, or maybe a gut feeling. But as far as Dale was concerned, Matthew was moving way too fast and possibly hiding secrets from Lauren.
You ever just wanna... Yeah, that's fall and...
Yet he could not put his finger on what exactly it was about Matthew that gave him that uneasiness. He decided to set his feelings aside because his daughter seemed so happy. In time, Matthew became part of the family. Dale's suspicions were finally taking shape when Matthew dropped a bombshell at the dinner table during a visit to Lauren's parents' house for a game night. He confessed to having a failed marriage prior to dating Lauren, but refused to share any other details. This raised questions about his integrity and intention, as not only had he already been divorced at such a young age, but also he hid the fact for months into his new relationship. And more than words, it was his body language that looked sketchy to Lauren's family. Lucky couple who had it all. The cough syrup theory could not be immediately discounted. After all, cough syrups, when taken in a high dosage, can cause euphoria, delusions, and dissociative phenomena which often result in people acting strangely. In order to solve the mystery of this killing, investigators began to dive deep into the couple's history.
Lauren Ashley Nicole Hugelmeyer was born on June 9, 1988 in Los Angeles County. In a tight-knit and religious family, Lauren had a picture-perfect childhood along with her two siblings, older sister Beth and younger sister Brianna. Lauren was known as an all-around happy person. She was known to be hardworking and studious. In 2007, Lauren graduated from Swain County High School in North Carolina. Afterward, she graduated college with a degree in business administration and management in 2011 from Appalachian State University. After completing her studies, she worked as an auditor at Quintiles. She also started her own business selling Scentsy products.
I have a pre-order list I can sell 5 of these starting today. So today until the 31st, I have a special offer for 5 people. If you want in on one of these.
She was very passionate about Scentsy, and her Facebook page was filled with photos and videos about her side business, including trips she took with others who sell the Scentsy products. Aside from that, Lauren was also an active member of Hope Lutheran Church and worked as a Sunday school teacher as part of her work with the church's children's and youth ministries. In her mid-20s, Lauren reconnected with one of her old classmates from middle school, Matthew Phelps. The two lost touch in high school since Matthew transferred and Lauren's family eventually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. While Lauren grew up in a loving home, Matthew had not been so fortunate. Matthew did not have any close bonds with his family. He was primarily raised by his grandparents because his parents neglected their responsibilities. His parents separated after his birth. While his biological father was entirely absent from his life, his mother was also rarely around. His mother remarried a few times, but Matthew never formed a father and son type bond with any of his stepfathers. His grandparents tried their best to provide him with love and care, but there was not enough to fill the vacant place in his heart. This dynamic may have been what caused him to start acting out from an early age. Whether his living conditions affected his mind or not, Matthew started hanging out with the wrong crowd and began abusing drugs and alcohol in his high school years. Matthew and his friends were known to have often consumed quercetin, the same medicine that he was now claiming to have taken before attacking his wife. High amounts of quercetin cause a high, which Matthew and his friends took advantage of. This addiction began to spiral out of control, and as a result, Matthew's grandparents were eventually forced to take Matthew out of public high school and put him in a private Christian academy to try to get his life back on the right track. This worked well for Matthew. He started getting better grades in school and eventually graduated. He then attended the Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, and seemed to have significantly improved from his early high school years to eventually graduating college in 2011. It was Matthew who stumbled upon Lauren's photos and realized that they both knew each other. After hesitating for a bit, Matthew reached out to Lauren through Instagram. He liked every picture of Lauren that was ever posted. The two began catching up, and as such things often go, the texts soon transitioned to long, late-night phone calls. Before long, both Matthew and Lauren fell head over heels for each other. The two began a long-distance relationship, since Matthew was still living in Kentucky at the time. Despite living hundreds of miles away from each other, the relationship between them began to progress very quickly. It did not take long before Matthew made the effort to visit Lauren in Raleigh. Eventually, he moved back to North Carolina to be with her. Being so close to her family, Lauren was excited to introduce Matthew to everyone. Most of her family welcomed Matthew with open arms, trusting Lauren's choices. They saw him as a kind and well-behaved man who genuinely cared for their daughter. Lauren's mother, Lori, thought him to be the perfect fit for her daughter. However, Lauren's father, Dale, was skeptical about the relationship. Perhaps it was just a father's protectiveness for his daughter, or maybe a gut feeling. But as far as Dale was concerned, Matthew was moving way too fast and possibly hiding secrets from Lauren. Yet he could not put his finger on what exactly it was about Matthew that gave him that uneasiness. He decided to set his feelings aside because his daughter seemed so happy. In time, Matthew became part of the family. Dale's suspicions were finally taking shape when Matthew dropped a bombshell at the dinner table during a visit to Lauren's parents' house for a game night. He confessed to having a failed marriage prior to dating Lauren, but refused to share any other details. This raised questions about his integrity and intention, as not only had he already been divorced at such a young age, but also he hid the fact for months into his new relationship. And more than words, it was his body language that looked sketchy to Lauren's family. Nevertheless, Lauren loved him with all her heart and didn't seem to mind any of his actions, so the family offered their support when they progressed to the next step in their relationship. The couple finally got engaged in 2015. The engagement party was remembered as one of a kind by her family and friends. Matthew's mother, whom the family described as problematic, did not really like Lauren. She even went to the point of purposefully wearing a white dress to the wedding to make her feelings known. However, the event went off without a hitch, and the couple tied the knot the following year. The pair incorporated the Star Wars theme in their wedding since they were both huge fans of the franchise. Both Lauren and Matthew seemed to be on top of the world as they started their new journey together. For Lauren, married life was a dream come true. She had her own house, a job that she put all of her efforts into, and a husband who always knew how to make her smile. However, the dream marriage soon began to transform into an ugly reality as Matthew began to show his true colors just a few months into their marriage. Matthew was having a hard time finding jobs, and when he did find a job, he'd soon leave the job with little to no explanation. In addition to that, he idly spent most of his time playing video games while Lauren had to work multiple jobs to run the household. According to Lauren's family, whom she often confided in, this put a strain on their finances. But that wasn't the only factor putting financial strain on Lauren. Matthew was overspending on fancy electronic gadgets and gaming equipment, while Lauren was focusing on tightening their purse strings. He spent $1,200 on iTunes and Xbox subscriptions for his video gaming. He'd even go to the extent of stealing money out of Lauren's purse if she ever refused to pay for his frivolous lifestyle. Lauren had approximately $10,000 in her bank account before getting married to Matthew, but by the time of her death, it had dwindled to only $1,000. There were other problems in the relationship besides just Matthew's spending habits. While visiting Matthew's family home with them 6 months after the couple got married, not only did his mother give Lauren the cold shoulder, but she and Matthew fought the whole time. She felt like an outcast in their home. Naturally, the reasons behind most of the fights were in regard to Matthew's money-spending habits, which prevented them from pursuing things they wanted to do together. As mentioned earlier, the couple was a big fan of Star Wars, and they were trying to save money for a trip to Disney World. However, Matthew would spend whatever little was saved on his own selfish habits, never allowing the couple to get ahead. Additionally, Lauren was suspicious that Matthew had had an extramarital affair with their neighbor, whom Matthew regularly spent time with. There was an instance when Lauren was on the phone with her elder sister, Beth, while cooking dinner for Matthew. After coming back from work, he went out to hang out with the neighbor and left a text for Lauren stating that he was having way too much fun with the neighbor and that Lauren should have dinner without him. Although Matthew spent a lot of time with their neighbor, he was extremely possessive of Lauren. There were multiple fights regarding a man at their church who, Matthew thought, was hitting on Lauren. Matthew distrusted Lauren, which caused even more distance between them. Matthew justified his insecurities by recounting the story of how his ex-wife left him after meeting another man on a missionary trip. For obvious reasons, his justifications would not solve anything, as their relationship was on a downward spiral. Lauren had opened up to loved ones on multiple occasions about her desire to leave her controlling husband less than a year into their marriage. However, because of her religious beliefs, she was adamant about making the marriage work and tried to push divorce to the back of her mind as a last resort.
And how are the numbers looking?
We're landing at a strong 70.
Ooh.
SPF.
Thanks to JetBlue's low fares, Kayla's in vacation mode already.
Finding sports on Zumo is easy. Being a sports fan is hard. Really, really hard. Well, with live sports and apps all in one place, at least they're easy to watch on Zumo.
Despite all of their issues, Lauren still tried to present a perfect marriage to the outside world. On every platform of social media, she continued to post pictures and videos of themselves accompanied by sugary sweet captions expressing their love. Yet that was in stark contrast to what was actually happening behind closed doors. Eventually, Matthew decided to go back to college to become a pastor for their church in an attempt to keep their marriage afloat. However, Lauren was not significantly impressed with this effort. In fact, fed up with his inconsiderate and immature behavior, Lauren was finally on the verge of leaving Matthew, but she would never have the chance to follow through with that decision. Instead, she was brutally murdered by her husband in their marital bed. With all this history, it did not take long to put the puzzle pieces together. They all concurred that everything about the crime scene looked way too staged. Not only were the knife and the cough syrup perfectly set out in certain positions, but Matthew had almost no blood on him, aside from some on his shoes and a few drops on his shirt. This was not consistent with someone who had stabbed a person 123 times. It looked as though Matthew had attempted to clean himself up, which contradicts his claims of being in a delusional state. Luminol tests performed around their apartment showed that there were traces of blood everywhere, which had been cleaned up before authorities could see it. Investigators now recalled how Matthew had shown no emotions when they arrived at the crime scene. Subsequently, Bayer, the maker of quercetin, released a statement saying that there was no evidence to suggest that quercetin is associated with violent behavior. Additionally, a medical report suggested that, at the time of the murder, his body contained a very low amount of the drug, and it was unlikely to have impacted his reasoning at all. However, Matthew opted to stick to his alibi about the cough syrup and did not change his story. So, investigators started digging deeper for more evidence. Upon delving further into Matthew's motives, the investigators found a journal where he wrote about all the troubles he was having with Lauren. He went on and on about his low esteem and insecurities in his relationship with Lauren. Despite Lauren's best efforts, Matthew never felt he fit in well with her family. The neighbor with whom Lauren had suspected Matthew of having an affair with told police that they were just friends and bonded over their struggles with anxiety and depression. She also shared that as they continued spending time together, Matthew began talking about more morbid subjects such as suicide and death. Perhaps he intended to get his hands on the licensed and concealed gun he knew she had in her home. Additionally, after gaining access to his phone, investigators discovered his concerning search history. He had searched for odd things, such as, "How loopy does quercetin make you?" Or, "Have other people been high from quercetin?" Looking solely at these Google searches, one could surmise that this murder was premeditated, and he was already planning on using the cough medicine as a defense. However, this circumstantial evidence was not enough to build a solid case against him. Yet, soon another discovery came to light. Matthew had a secret Instagram account, @Marty_radical, where he posted dark images from the movie American Psycho and pictures of him dressed as Patrick Bateman, the lead character of the movie. Apparently, Matthew was obsessed with serial killers and expressed to a friend that he was curious about what it would feel like to kill someone. Right before he murdered Lauren, he posted an Instagram photo with a caption saying, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer. #found an angel to kill." The account contained numerous posts that discussed the devil and demons. Finally, it was time to bring the matter to trial. Prosecutors were confident that they had enough evidence to implicate Matthew in his wife's intentional murder. However, Matthew's defense argued in court that this wasn't in Matthew's character and that he was in an unstable and depressed mental state when the murder occurred.
With everybody so that we can all together get to the bottom of this really significant tragedy.
To support the claim, they presented a few letters from Matt's co-workers to the judge, insisting that this was not in Matthew's character. The prosecution brought Matthew's ex-wife to the stand. Contradicting Matthew's previous claims of her cheating on him, she revealed that it was Matthew who cheated on her multiple times throughout their marriage. Like Lauren, she seemed to have similar issues in her marriage to Matthew. These included Matthew not working, spending way too much money, and not contributing anything to their dreams together, which ended up causing the separation. Matthew ultimately accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder to avoid the death penalty he was initially facing.
After pleading guilty to one offense, that's the offense of first-degree murder, it is a felony. It carries the maximum penalty of death or or life without the possibility of parole. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Do you personally plead guilty to the charge I just described?
Yes, sir.
And did you in fact murder your wife, Lauren Hugelmeyer Phelps, by stabbing her multiple times?
Yes, sir.
The matter finally came to a conclusion on October 5th, 2018, when Matthew was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After sentencing, Matthew read an apology to Lauren's family.
I'm sorry that I took away Lauren's life, a life that was deeply connected to so many people.
However, his apology fell on deaf ears, as her family said that it meant nothing to them.
Never. I'll take him to my grave, and I'll still hate him. There's no way. No man can do that to any human being.
They stated that they could never forgive him for his thoughtless actions. They shared in a statement, "He was luring all of us into a trap by taking advantage of our kindness and generosity. We never once thought Lauren was in danger." To this day, Lauren's family feels a sense of blame for not intervening when they knew the relationship had taken a turn for the worse. To help others like their beloved Lauren, they've put together an organization called Lauren's Light, which raises awareness for abusive relationships and domestic violence.
Throwing epic parties? That's totally my thing. So, I always add a bunch of excitement with...
On June 8, 2012, the Vancouver Police Department in Canada received a desperate call from a 25-year-old Chinese exchange student, Yuan Ji Tang. The caller said that his mother, 47-year-old Lian Ji Guo, who was there visiting him, went missing just one day before she was supposed to return to her home country of China. She was particularly vulnerable because of her inability to speak or even understand English, her native tongue being Cantonese. Lianji and her husband Tang Juihe went to Vancouver, Canada 20 days prior to visit her son, Yuan Shi Tang, who was studying at Douglas College in Canada. They rented a B&B and made lots of plans for the three of them to spend time together as a family. Yuan was excited to show his parents around his new city. After a wonderful visit with their son, it was time for Tang Juihe and Lianji to go back home. They had a flight scheduled to China on the afternoon of June 7, 2012. According to Yuan's statement, on the morning of their flight, Yuan made his way to the rented apartment to pick up his parents to go to the airport, but his father was still sleeping. As there was still plenty of time, Yuan decided to let him sleep in and took his mother for breakfast at a restaurant. After breakfast, they returned to the B&B, where he began loading all of their luggage into his car. He could see his mother watching him from the window as he was loading the luggage. He stated he then went to a nearby mall to make a purchase. But shockingly, when he returned, his mother was nowhere to be found. Yuan woke his father up to inquire about his mother's whereabouts. Initially, they weren't all that concerned. They assumed that Luanji had just stepped outside for a minute and couldn't have been very far. After unsuccessfully trying to reach her by phone, they waited for some time, expecting her to come back. After a few hours, when she did not show up, they went to look for her. They searched around the city for quite some time with no luck. Since the flight was for that afternoon, Yuan and his father headed to the airport, thinking she may have caught a cab there. Unfortunately, she wasn't there either. As the airport announced the boarding of their flight, Tang Juihe was torn between going back home and searching for his wife. However, Yuan reassured him that it must have been a simple mix-up, and that he'd be thoroughly searching for her and send her home once she was found. Tang Juihe returned home after a 13-hour flight filled with confusion and anxiety. His wife's seat beside him remained empty. Unable to find his mother, Yuan called the police the following morning. An investigation was launched immediately in an attempt to find Lianji. When they reached the scene, they did not find anything suspicious. However, police speculated that Lianji was trying to illegally stay in Canada and did not want to return home. However, this theory was filled with holes. Yuan's family ran a very successful furniture transport business, making them very well off. They had customers across the world, including the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia. While Tang Juihe visited his son often during business trips, Lianji was visiting Vancouver for the first time. She had no history of any addiction, mental instability, affairs, or known enemies. There was really no reason for her to want to illegally stay in Canada. This theory was eventually thrown out when Lian Ji's belongings, including her money, passport, and handbag, were discovered in Yuan's car. Fearing that she may have been abducted by someone, Yuan set out on a mission to find his mother. He handed out flyers with his mother's picture and details. He also gave interviews and held press conferences to spread awareness about his mother's disappearance in hopes of getting significant information. His father soon returned to Vancouver to assist in the investigation and search for his wife. The public, especially the Chinese community, was moved by the story of the father and son who were desperate to find their loved one. Many locals volunteered in the search efforts. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation, but for days, the search yielded no results. There were no ransom calls, which weakened the theory of kidnapping. At this point, when several days had passed with no new leads, cops were considering a much more sinister outcome. As a last resort, police began to look at this case from a different angle. They started looking closely at the family members. As they dug deeper, a strange piece of information caught their attention. Oddly, Yuan had rented an apartment in the same B&B in which his parents were staying, but failed to ever mention this to authorities. All this time, police believed Yuan was living in his own apartment and came to visit with his parents from time to time during their stay. Now it looked as though he was staying just next door to them the entire time. When police questioned Yuan regarding this, he simply said, "You didn't ask me, I didn't say." Upon further questioning as to why he rented a room in the B&B when he already had a rented apartment nearby, he justified it by saying he intended to spend as much time as possible with his parents. Although this bit of information did not prove that Yuan had anything to do with his mother's disappearance, his nonchalant attitude was enough to raise suspicion. Investigators also noticed that Yuan was also trying to downplay his English-speaking skills, avoiding some questions along the way, which also seems strange considering his 6 years of study in Canada. At this time, investigators started to look at Yuan as a person of interest. There was another anomaly in his story. He first told the police that his mother was alone and went missing from the B&B, but later changed his story and said they went to have breakfast and from there she went missing. He again changed his story later and said she was in his apartment and disappeared from there. Shocked by Yuan's lies, Tang Juihe asked him why he would do such a thing. Yuan told him that he did this to save his landlord from legal trouble, since his landlord illegally divided the rent and had done him a favor by not calling the cops into his apartment. Though the excuse sounded lame, Tang Juihe wanted to put all his efforts into finding his wife instead of arguing with his son. But police started digging deeper for clues. They interrogated the tenants in the B&B in Richmond, Vancouver, and they all said that the family got along really well. They hit a dead end, unable to gather any evidence. 2 weeks later, in a press conference, Tang Juihe and Yuan said that although they could not rule out the possibility that something bad had happened, they were hopeful that Lian Ji was safe and sound and would be reunited with them soon. At that point, investigators were leaning toward homicide rather than a disappearance. With hopes of finding remains or any evidence, they beefed up their manpower and began sweeping the nearby wooded areas, but to no avail. Despite all efforts, there was practically no progress in the case. As the business back in China was falling apart, Tang Juihe had no option but to return home. Once again, he was relying on his son to keep the search for his mother alive, which Yuan promised him he would do, before persuading his father to go back. On July 20th, 2012, Lian Ji's case was formally handed over to Canada's Integrated Homicide Investigation Unit. Detectives from IHIU believed from the start that Lian Ji's family members were involved in her disappearance and possible homicide. However, they were unsure whether it was Tang Juihe or Yuan Ji Tang who was the culprit. Looking at the inconsistencies in Yuan's statements, IHIU detectives zeroed in on him. When they went to search the B&B, they found traces of blood on the ceiling, walls, closet, and nightstand in the room that Yuan was previously staying in. They also found a massive spot of dried blood on the bed. The blood was taken into the lab for testing, but couldn't be determined who it belonged to. As the blood evidence alone wasn't enough, Yuan couldn't be apprehended. Detectives also wanted to search Yuan's apartment, but they did not have enough to get a search warrant, and Yuan refused to let them in without one. July 20th, 2012 marked 1.5 months from Lianji's disappearance. On the same day, police received a call regarding the finding of a suitcase containing human remains on the beach near Harwood Island, a 6-hour drive from Vancouver. When cops reached the scene, they discovered the corpse of a middle-aged Asian woman. Looking at her clothes, police immediately thought of the missing Lianji Guo. An autopsy later confirmed this. The results suggested that she died from multiple blows to her head. In her spine, 5 steel nails marked with Chinese words were found, which was consistent with the characteristics of Lianji, as she had spinal surgery recently. When genetic tests were performed, the corpse was officially identified as 47-year-old Lianji Guo. Unfortunately, there was no surveillance cameras in the areas where her body was found, and therefore no way to know who left the suitcase on the beach. Meanwhile, RCMP took over the case and strategized to go undercover. They neither went public with the discovery, nor did they inform Yuan. At the start of August 2012, an undercover female police officer of Chinese descent contacted Yuan and said she had some information about his mother. The Cantonese-speaking officer met Yuan at a local Starbucks and informed him that she had found his mother's body inside a suitcase by the sea, but she hadn't informed the police. She was willing to get rid of it if Yuan paid up. Although Yuan denied any connection to his mother's death and wanted to get away, the officer further insisted that she was going to give him 2 days to think about it. If not, she was going to the police. Yuan called her up that night to accede to her demands. In the next meeting, she introduced him to 2 more undercover cops who told him that getting rid of a body was easy enough for them, provided he gave them money. They claimed that one of their team members was dying from cancer and could be the fall guy if all the details of the murder were supplied to them. But Yuan had no money to give them, so he made a shocking proposal. He said if they killed his father, he'd inherit everything, and then he could pay them. The undercover cops agreed to his plan as well, but demanded to know the details. Yuan fell for this well-planned trap and began to tell them the entire story. Yuan was the only son of the couple, Tang Juihe and Lianji Guo from Foshan. They ran a successful business with an annual turnover of 10 million yen. Lianji's strong character was an asset to the business. However, she also had a need to control things, especially when it came to her son. She was what could be called a tiger mom. Every detail of Yuan's life, be it career planning or love life, was scrutinized by Lianji. She was responsible for Yuan's breakup with his high school sweetheart, as she had an ordinary family background. Lianji controlled the family's wealth, and she kept a tight rein on Yuan's pocket money. In 2006, then 19-year-old Yuan was sent to Canada by his parents against his will to pursue a higher education. He was to study hotel management at Douglas Community College so that he might build his own identity in Canada and extend the family business. Yuan felt lonely in a foreign country with no desire to pursue business and feeling oppressed by his mother's control. Yuan felt manipulated and coerced by their emotional abuse, and even his classmates complained about his mother. Yuan started lying to his parents, using various pretexts to obtain money, which he would spend on gambling or partying instead of studying for his degree. His grades were very poor and not suitable to pursue further education. To pay for his expenses, he worked part-time in the kitchen of a Chinese restaurant in Vancouver, despite having a student visa that did not allow him to work in Canada. He earned only $850 per month. Meanwhile, his family in China were completely unaware of his activities. In 2011, he returned to China to spend the holidays with his family. This time, he met a girl. In a very short time span, he proposed to her. His mother objected to the marriage and found a more suitable girl for him to marry, according to her standards. This upset him. After graduation, most of his classmates returned to China, and his circle of friends became smaller. He longed to return to China to reunite with his fiancée. He explained to his father that he felt imprisoned in Canada, but his father urged him to push further. His fiancée, meanwhile, became pregnant with what he believed was his child, but then underwent an abortion. This further pushed him toward the edge. In May of 2012, his parents visited him in Canada. He rented 2 B&B rooms in Richmond, one for himself and one for his parents. He explained that they could not stay at his place because it was a shared apartment. He also rented a car, claiming that he bought it. He showed his parents around Vancouver, but even then, tensions between them were building. He wanted to be free of them, free to do as he pleased with his life.
With Dell's powerful and scalable storage solutions, we've taken the complexity out of managing multiple clouds with storage.
At some point, Yuan found a hammer in the B&B toolbox and stashed it inside his backpack. On the morning of June 7th, upon realizing that his father had not yet woken up, Yuan spread some coins on his bed and called his mother to his room on the pretext of helping him clean it up. When Lianji knelt to clean it, he hit her on the head with the hammer. When she started struggling, he covered her head with a sheet and struck twice more to ensure she was dead. After killing his mother, his mind raced. He wondered whether he should kill his father too. However, after a few minutes, he decided not to go through with it, fearing that suspicion could fall on him if the two of them disappeared at the same time. After convincing his father to return to China, Yuan returned to the B&B to clean up his mess. After getting rid of the evidence, it was time for Yuan to get into the role of the good son. Yuan put up the facade of a concerned son and reported her missing. After he was done telling his story to the undercover officers, he reenacted the whole incident, not knowing his performance was being recorded. His secret was about to blow up in his face. At this point, investigators had more evidence than they could have ever expected. Yet they decided to take it slow and gather more evidence against Yuan to corroborate his story. It did not take long to track down the rented car with traces of blood inside. They also found evidence of burn stains and blood from the storage room of Yuan's apartment. On September 7, 2012, Yuan Ji-tang was formally arrested for the murder of his mother, exactly 3 months after her disappearance. In addition to the murder charge, he faced additional charges of plotting to kill his father. Although he tried to deny everything, he eventually confessed once all the evidence was presented before him, including the video evidence he had unknowingly given undercover agents. Life turned upside down for Tang Juihe in the blink of an eye when the news broke in China about Yuan's arrest, which prompted his immediate return to Canada. He couldn't believe that his son was capable of murdering his own mother. Yuan, on the other hand, showed no remorse. He went on to say that he had no regrets about what he did. "She's been holding me back, not just controlling me a little. These are my parents and will control me for life. People are going to die. It doesn't matter if it's sooner or later." It was later discovered that Yuan had been planning to kill his parents for a long time. He waited for them to come to Canada because this country had no death penalty. He was also skeptical if Canadian police would be capable enough to solve a crime so twisted. As it turned out, he overestimated his intellect as much as he underestimated Canadian law enforcement. Shockingly, despite Yuan's horrific deeds and plotting, Tang Juihe stood by his son during the trial. He not only forgave him, but invested a lot of his fortune in Yuan's legal aid. His reasoning? He already lost his wife and couldn't afford to lose his only son too, despite all of his wrongdoings. In one of many jail visits with Yuan, he stated, "No matter how wrong you are, I will forgive you. Your mother is gone. If you die, I don't want to live." Somehow, Tang Juihe was certain that his wife would understand his reasoning while watching over them from heaven. In court, while testifying as a prosecution witness, he begged for leniency for his son, saying that Yuan was a good man before their strict parenting ruined everything. However, the court seemed to differ, as they found him guilty after a lengthy trial. Finally, on February 2, 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada handed down the sentence of life in prison to Yuan Ji-tang for the second-degree murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father, with parole eligibility after 17 years. This complex case of control and betrayal remains one of the most controversial and disheartening in recent Canadian history. In the end, the culprit faced justice, but a family was forever destroyed.
No matter what type of severe asthma you have, Tespire can help you have fewer attacks.
Born on July 4, 1980 in Erkelenz, Germany, Nicole was raised by her mother, Angelica Tegermeyer. Nicole was allegedly the product of an extramarital affair. A year after her birth, a paternity test proved that a married man from the same village was her biological father. Nicole never shared a relationship with her father, though. A few months later, Angelica met musician Ad van der Herk. 2 years after meeting, they married and moved to Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Together, Angelica and Ad raised Nicole and his son Andy from another marriage. It was a well-blended family, but the marriage would not last long. Nicole's mother, Angelica, suffered from severe mental health issues. She often isolated herself from her family and suffered from bouts of depression. Angelica and Ad divorced in 1989 when Nicole was 8 years old. Ad, however, filed for primary custody of Nicole, citing that Angelica would be unfit to raise their daughter. He was awarded full custody and raised both Andy and Nicole. However, being a musician meant Ad traveled frequently, and Nicole and Andy lived primarily with Ad's mother, their grandmother. Due to Angelica's mental health issues, she and Nicole did not share a mother-daughter relationship in the traditional sense. After a while, Nicole's dad met another woman, a fellow musician named Jolanda van der Weeden. She seemed to get along pretty well with the family, and soon Jolanda and Ad married. Both being musicians, Jolanda and Ad were often still on the road touring, leaving both Andy and Nicole to be raised by their grandmother in Eindhoven. Nicole was very close to her grandmother and did not mind this. Tragedy, though, followed Nicole. After Ad's remarriage, Angelica, who still loved him, fell into a depression despite the help she'd been receiving. In April 1995, Angelica committed suicide when Nicole was around 14 years old. Nicole was devastated by the news. She'd lost the chance to repair her relationship with her mother. However, her family and friends stepped in and did not allow Nicole to fall into a depressive spell that could see her spiraling dangerously out of control like her mother. Ad spent as much time comforting Nicole as he could. Her friends, too, stepped in and became the support group she needed. She eventually put her mind to focus and got herself a job at a nearby bakery in Woenstel. Keeping herself busy kept her mind away from intrusive thoughts. Her family and friends said she was overall a good person, trustworthy, and very responsible.
You need to know what you are up against. St. Nicholas had a dart.
It was these personality traits that raised the alarm. On October 6, 1995, Nicole left her grandmother's house at around 5 a.m. and cycled to work. This was her everyday route, and she never missed a shift without good reason. So when Nicole failed to show up for work, her manager and the bakery owner called the police to report her missing. Police then contacted her grandmother and father, but they too hadn't seen Nicole and said she had left for work as per the usual. Police launched an immediate search, canvassing the area and asking people if they'd seen Nicole or her bike in the immediate vicinity. Scouring the surrounding area, it wasn't until later that same evening that Nicole's bicycle was found along the bank of the Dommel River. Sadly, there was no trace of Nicole or her belongings. Looking into Nicole's background, investigators started to believe that Nicole, like other teenagers sometimes do, simply ran away from home. She did suffer a great loss and still had extended family in Germany. Her father, Ad, however, said that it was highly unlikely as she'd not shown any signs of rebelling or wanting to leave. The search continued, and on October 19, 1995, her backpack was found near the Eindhoven Canal. Investigators continued to receive numerous tips, totaling nearly 300 leads. Then, things changed on October 24, 1995, when a man called the police station claiming to know the identity of the person who killed Nicole. The call cut off abruptly before it could be traced and left investigators with more questions than answers. This flipped the course of the investigation on end. Police now continuously interviewed Nicole's friends and family, poring over all the evidence they had in order to catch a break in the case. Nicole's stepmother, Jolanda, allegedly contacted psychics as the frustration of Nicole's disappearance weighed on everyone involved. They were told to concentrate on 2 canals. Using search and rescue police dogs, investigators conducted a thorough walkthrough of the alleged areas Nicole may have possibly gone to, but there was just no trace of her. All this changed on November 22nd, 1995. A hiker who was passing by the woods between the towns of Mierlo and Liro discovered human remains. He ran to the nearby town and informed local authorities of his discovery. The police arrived on the scene and already suspected who the remains belonged to. After forensic testing, the remains were identified as Nicole Vandenherk, ending the search in tragedy. An autopsy revealed that Nicole had suffered 2 fractures to the jaw and injuries to her head and fingers. She had also been raped and was stabbed by a small knife that broke her rib and ultimately caused her death due to internal bleeding. Her family was devastated even more so when they were told that there was no evidence to help identify her killer. Nicole's funeral was held on November 28, 1995, and was attended by over 1,000 mourners who wanted to pay their last respects to the beautiful blonde teen. This was only the beginning of a long journey to justice. Her boyfriend at the time was interviewed, but being a minor, his name and photo had not been released, and he was cleared after no evidence could be found linking him to her murder. Police also tried another angle by broadcasting the phone call made by the anonymous man on national television in January 1996, hoping someone would recognize the voice and come forward. Unfortunately, though, this tactic did not bear any fruit. The case was getting cold fast until police discovered yet another lead. A friend of the Vandenherk family, Celine Hartogs, was arrested and detained in Miami in February 1996 for drug trafficking. During her questioning, she told police that the men she had been working for allegedly murdered Nicole. She further claimed that because of her knowledge of the crime, she was forced to be a drug mule in order to save her own life. Initially, Ad himself believed the girl and supported her claims, but over time, her stories became a bit more whimsical. Police questioned her further and were soon able to whittle away at the lies and discovered her story was flawed. She had just been trying to shave off prison time from her own sentence. Ad also distanced himself from the story and continued to search for answers in Nicole's death. Police pulled out all the stops and brought both Ad and Andy in for questioning between May and June 1996 regarding Nicole's murder. It was a small town, and people were shocked when police began looking into family members as possible persons of interest. They had been a close family, and the locals didn't believe either man could be responsible. Following hours of interrogations, both Ad and Andy were cleared and released after investigators could find no evidence linking them back to Nicole's murder. Despite the steadily growing reward being offered for information regarding Nicole's murder, no relevant leads came through. Slowly, the case grew colder, and the number of investigators working on it dwindled. In 2004, another team of cold case detectives took a crack at the investigation. But once again, none of their leads panned out. Nicole's death remained unsolved, gathering cobwebs as the years went by without any new information. The years passed, and things did not get any easier for the family. Nicole's death particularly affected Andy, who was just 5 years older and shared a close bond with his stepsister. Having lost both Angelica and Nicole in such tragic ways, Andy developed psychological problems. He turned to alcohol and often fought against depression. He'd also been distancing himself from his family since Nicole's murder, and eventually relocated to England away from the reminder and the memories of Nicole and the tragedy they suffered. Ad remained in the Netherlands, putting focus into his music career and praying for a miracle that would lead to uncovering the truth behind Nicole's murder. Eventually, though, Ad and Yolanda too split up and went their separate ways. Ad moved to Spain, but kept in contact with Andy through phone calls. However, they were emotionally drained after Nicole's untimely demise, and their relationship became strained over time as well. Andy's strange behavior came to a heated end on March 8, 2011. On Facebook, he posted, "I will be arrested today for the murder of my sister. I confessed, and I will get in contact soon." In mere moments, his comment was shared over 1,000 times. He was immediately arrested by British police and once again made a similar confession while in custody. This confession led to Andy being extradited back to the Netherlands to stand trial for the murder of Nicole. Once back in the Netherlands, Andy was detained in jail and not allowed contact with anyone, including his family. It created a major twist in the case, but the only problem was that there was no evidence apart from the Facebook confession. Police interviewed Ad about his son's confession. Surprisingly, Ad didn't believe Andy was telling the truth. He believed that Andy was just seeking some time in the spotlight after the attention generated by Nicole's case. Yolanda, too, was interviewed following this major twist, but didn't have much to offer in the way of evidence. She said that there had to be an ulterior motive for Andy's vicious crime. Yolanda did not believe that Andy could have done something like this with no apparent reason, but had no idea what the reason could possibly be. But this was only the first shocking statement made by Andy. Soon after he was released due to insufficient evidence, Andy made another damning accusation. He told police that he did not, in fact, kill his sister, but needed to reignite the focus on her case after so many years. That's when he dropped another bombshell. He told police that he'd been keeping a secret that was eating away at him from inside. He knew who killed Nicole. His father, Ad. Andy went on to make serious allegations against Ad, claiming that he'd raped Nicole and she'd become pregnant. In order to cover up his crimes, Ad, Andy claimed, then killed her to keep it a secret. Dumbfounded by Andy's accusations, Ad said he could not believe that Andy would think he was responsible for Nicole's murder. Andy said that he loved Nicole as if she were his own daughter and never wished any harm upon her. These accusations, added to the fact that both Ad and Andy were, at one point in the investigation, persons of interest, led authorities to exhume Nicole's body to conduct further DNA testing. On September 9th, 2011, Nicole's body was exhumed and sent off to the Netherlands Forensic Institute. The whiplash created by Andy's confessions put added scrutiny on investigators to leave no stone unturned until they got to the bottom of the case. During the examination, 3 different DNA profiles were compiled from a single trace of sperm. The case was therefore reopened at the end of 2012, with scientists turning to forensic specialists from New Zealand. With the help of the Institute of Environmental Science and Research Facility, ESR, based in Auckland, New Zealand, scientists were able to separate and test the different DNA samples found on Nicole's body. Afterwards, a mathematical and statistical approach was used to determine a true positive match based on which DNA profile appeared more prominently over the other. The 3 DNA samples were identified as male, and now it was up to Dutch investigators to go back and test the results against those of the suspects, which included Ad and Andy. One of the samples belonged to Nicole's then-boyfriend, who was ruled out due to his solid alibi from previous interviews. The second profile was allegedly unknown. However, in some reports it was said to be Andy's. Police never confirmed those reports. The third profile yielded some interesting results. On January 14, 2014, 46-year-old Jos de G was arrested at his home in Helmond, a city in Eindhoven. Finding his DNA on Nicole could have meant anything, but police were not giving up so easily. After a lengthy interrogation, investigators learned from de G that on the day of Nicole's disappearance, he'd had an argument with a girlfriend before storming out of the house. Investigators placed the clues together and believed that de G may have seen Nicole on her way to work, and in that moment of anger, unleashed his frustration on the young woman. These may have just been a theory, but de G did have a history. De G was previously convicted of 3 sexually motivated crimes. This first incident involved a 20-year-old woman who was violently raped after de G grabbed her off her bicycle and took her to a remote area to carry out the crime. This scenario was similar to Nicole's in every way, apart from the stabbing. The second 2 incidents involved an ex-girlfriend whom he'd sexually abused in her own home. It was also noted that de G suffered from mental health problems and had been institutionalized and received psychiatric treatment. The discovery of the new suspect meant that Andy had been playing a very dangerous game. After de G's name was added to the investigation, Andy confessed that the entire Facebook post and accusations leveled against his father were a publicity stunt to reopen the investigation. Since Nicole's death, Andy had been developing a plan and making inquiries about DNA testing and exhumation. He had, over the years, approached police regarding what it would take to get the investigators to exhume and retest the DNA that he believed would be found on Nicole's body. For him, it was time to act as technological advancements had improved since her murder back in 1995. Destroying his own reputation was a risk he was willing to take if it meant justice for his sister, whom he loved so much. Andy knew he had to be convincing enough, given all the red tape behind exhumation policies, and had to give investigators a solid enough reason to retest the evidence. It was a gamble that paid off, and people started to call Andy a hero for taking such a risk. However, the shock of it all was not easily forgotten by his father Ad, and their relationship suffered some strain. But it had got the man they now believed killed their beloved Nicole to trial. The case first went to court in April 2014 and would begin another round of twists as it progressed. DeG's lawyer disputed the DNA evidence, citing other DNA profiles were also gathered during the investigation from Nicole's exhumed body. He insisted that any of the other male profiles could belong to the killer. He further argued that Nicole and DeG could have had a consensual sexual relationship. Nicole had other sexual partners and may have also been pregnant at the time of her death. The prosecution countered the allegations, stating that Nicole had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. DeG, they said, had still been furious from a fight with his girlfriend when he'd come across Nicole. They did concede that there was no motive for killing Nicole other than her being a victim of opportunity in which DeG could unleash all of his pent-up anger. The defense stuck to their claims of the other DNA profiles belonging to the real killer. DeG's trial for the manslaughter and rape charges began in November 2nd, 2015. The prosecution brought forward 2 witnesses who claimed DeG confessed to killing the girl. However, DeG's defense team argued that the witnesses had been institutionalized along with DeG at the time and were just confessing in order to cash in on the €15,000 reward that was being offered for more information. The defense further argued that DNA was poorly stored and pushed for samples to be reanalyzed. The court conceded, despite the prosecution arguing it was a delay tactic. The tests were carried out once again by a new forensics team. This delayed the trial to the next year, and in April 2016, the new forensics team presented the results confirming that the most likely suspect was, in fact, DeG. On October 12, 2016, the trial resumed with all the new evidence in place. It was to be a very painful process for the family. The prosecution argued that DeG be sentenced to 14 years in prison for the manslaughter and rape of Nicole, as the accused DeG could not possibly have had a consensual relationship with Nicole given his background, stating that she would not have willingly developed a relationship with him. After much deliberation, and the fact that 2 DNA tests conducted by separate teams pointed to DeG as the most probable suspect, on October 9, 2018, DeG's acquittal was overturned, and he was sentenced to 12 years for the rape and manslaughter of Nicole. Following the conviction, life mostly returned to normal for the Van den Herk family. Both Andy and Ad were proven innocent through DNA results, allowing them to breathe a sigh of relief. Andy returned to England and tried to live out the rest of his days as normally as he could. In May 2022, though, there would be another dramatic end. Neighbors of Andy started to notice his absence and requested a welfare check by police. Upon arrival, police knocked, but with no response, they were forced to break down the door and enter his apartment. Greeted with a foul stench, police ventured into the bedroom and found Andy dead on his bed. Near his body were numerous bottles of alcohol and prescription drugs. It was later determined that Andy committed suicide when toxicology reports proved that the excess amounts of alcohol and drugs caused him to have a heart attack. Investigators determined that, given the stress of Nicole's murder and the subsequent search for justice, Andy could not handle the reality of it all. They believe he eventually succumbed to his depression, given his history of mental health struggles. And this marked the end of Andy Van den Herk's tragic, yet unusually heroic tale. A man many say loved his sister beyond measure, so much so that he risked his own reputation and freedom to solve the mystery of her murder. Not only did he help solve Nicole's murder, but he also helped investigators remove a dangerous criminal from society. A Arushi Talwar was born on the 24th of May, 1994, to her loving parents, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Nupur Talwar. Both parents were dentists who practiced at a clinic they shared with another dentist couple, as well as the Fortis Hospital, where Rajesh was the head of the dental department. Additionally, Dr. Rajesh also taught at the ITS College of Dentistry. All those who knew Arushi described her as a kind, pretty girl who had many friends and was always happy and carefree. She was known to be a huge fan of the Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan. When she saw him in a commercial, she would say to her friends, "I wish I could jump into the TV and marry him right now." She was shy, but she did have one secret desire that she confided in friends. "I want to become famous." She was a student at the Delhi Public School and was well loved by her friends in school who had nothing bad to say about her. At home too, as the only child of the dentist couple, she was doted on by her parents. The Talwars seemed to be the perfect representation of a happy, loving family. Living along with them in their apartment in Sector 25 of Noida was Yam Prasad Banjodi, better known as Hemraj, who was the live-in domestic help and cook for the Talwars. He was not Indian, but came from Nepal and belonged to the Darapani village in the Argakanchi district. Everything seemed to be perfect in the life of Arushi and the Talwars. She was happy, doing well in school, and had many friends who loved her. Her parents' business was successful and the family was fairly well off. It all seemed too good to be true. And it turns out, it was. On the night of May 15th, 2008, less than 10 days before Arushi's 14th birthday, a heart-wrenching tragedy struck the Talwar household, and it would never be the same again.
A 14-year-old girl, Arushi Talwar, was murdered in the home of her parents, her throat slit.
May 15th, 2008 was a normal day in the Talwar household by all accounts. Rajesh taught at the ITS Dental College from 8:45 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. before treating patients at his clinic till 8:30 p.m. Nupur treated patients at the clinic from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then picked Arushi up from school at 1:30 p.m. and returned home to their apartment with her. They then were joined for lunch by Nupur's sister-in-law, Vandana, the wife of Rajesh's brother, Dinesh. Nupur and Vandana left after lunch, while Arushi remained at home. Nupur worked at Fortis Hospital from 4:30 to 7 p.m. before returning to the apartment around 7:30 p.m. Rajesh arrived home soon after, around 9:30 p.m., and was dropped off by his driver, Umesh Sharma. When Umesh came to the apartment at 9:40 p.m. after parking the car nearby to hand over Rajesh's bag and the keys of the car to Hemraj, he saw Nupur and Arushi at the dining table and Rajesh coming out of his room. He was the last person outside the home to see Arushi alive. After eating dinner, which Hemraj had prepared for the family, the Talwars stated that they went to Arushi's room, where they gave her Sony DSC W130 digital camera as an early birthday present.
And the courier had come in the morning, we had ordered a camera for her. Rajesh said, "No, let's give it to her on the 24th. And I said, "De dete hain, it's her birthday party, 3 days, she can take pictures."
The camera had arrived by courier earlier that day, and despite Rajesh wanting to wait for Arushi's birthday to give it to her, he was persuaded by Nupur to present it to her that night as an early birthday surprise. Arushi took several photographs of herself and her parents, the last one being recorded at 10:10 p.m. Afterward, her parents retired to their room for the night, while Arushi remained in her own room. Around 11 p.m., Rajesh asked Nupur to go turn on the Wi-Fi, and because the router was in Arushi's room, she had to enter it again. According to Nupur, when she did, Arushi was fine and was reading Chetan Bhagat's The 3 Mistakes of My Life. Nupur says she returned to her own room after switching off the router. Around this time, Rajesh answered a call on the landline which indicated the ringer was on. He then surfed some dentistry sites and his stock portfolio until 11:41 p.m., which was the last time his laptop showed internet usage. However, the last use of the internet router was at 12:08 a.m. At around midnight, Anmal, a friend of Arushi's, called her cell phone. When she didn't answer, he tried the house's landline, but again, there was no answer, which was strange as Rajesh had used it only an hour ago when he answered his call. He then sent her a text message at around 12:30 a.m., but this never reached her phone. The exact events after this time remain unclear, and investigators are still unsure as to what exactly happened between 12 and 6 a.m. in the Talwar household. However, the events of the next morning have been very well documented. On the morning of May 16, 2008, the family's housemaid, Bharathi Mandal, rang the doorbell of the apartment at around 6 a.m. She had only been employed by the family for about 6 days, and usually Hemraj would open the door for her in the morning, as Nupur and Rajesh tended to sleep in a bit longer. However, this morning, no one opened the door, even when she rang the bell twice. Confused, she tried to push on the outermost door as it sometimes jammed shut, but it did not budge. When she rang the bell a third time, Nupur opened the innermost door. She then told Bharathi that the middle grill door was locked from the outside, and explained that Hemraj had probably locked it from the outside when he went to purchase milk for the morning. She initially asked Bharathi to wait outside until Hemraj returned, but Bharathi did not want to wait, so she said she'd go downstairs so Nupur could throw her the keys for the gate from the balcony. Nupur then called Hemraj's phone to see where he was, but the call was cut off. When she tried to call him again, his phone appeared to be switched off. In this time, Bharathi had gone downstairs, and Nupur called out for her to check if the door was only latched, not locked. But Bharathi insisted she throw down the keys anyways, so she'd not have to take the stairs again, and Nupur did so. While this was happening, Rajesh too had awoken and left the bedroom. When he entered the living room, he saw a nearly empty whiskey bottle on the dining room table with bloodstains on it, which worried him. He asked Nupur who had left the bottle there, and when she did not know, in a state of panic, he asked her to check Arushi's room. The door of Arushi's room was self-locking and could only be opened from the outside with a key when shut. But that morning, the door was left slightly ajar and unlocked. When they entered, what they saw left them shocked to their cores. Arushi was lying on her bed with her throat slit. There was blood on the bed, walls, and floor. Her body had been covered with a white flannel blanket, and a school bag had been placed over her face to cover the injuries on it. Rajesh started screaming in panic, while Nupur remained quiet, in stunned silence out of the pure shock at what she was seeing. Meanwhile, Bharati returned to the outermost gate. She pushed it, and it opened without the key. She found that the middle door was latched, but not locked. She opened the latch and walked in. On entering the apartment, she saw that both Rajesh and Nupur were in tears. Rajesh loudly accused the missing Hemraj in front of her, exclaiming, "See what Hemraj has done." She was then shown Arushi's body and room by Nupur, but did not enter it. Unsure of what to do and how to console the grieving parents, she rushed out of the house and informed the neighbors as to what had happened. The Talwars, too, called their family and friends to tell them of the tragedy that had befallen them. In all of this, the police were not informed until Punish Ray Tandon, a neighbor who lived one floor below the Talwars, asked the apartment security guard, Virendra Singh, to inform the police. The UP State Police arrived at the house by 6:50 a.m. on the morning of May 16th, but by the time they'd arrived, the crime scene was in absolute chaos. Neighbors, close friends, and relatives had all arrived, having been called by the Talwars who told them of the murder. Over 20 people were present in the living area and the Talwars' bedroom. They had completely trampled upon the crime scene, destroying any and all traces of evidence that the police could have used in their investigation. Only Arushi's bedroom had been left vacant, and this is where the most evidence would be recovered from. The two officers who led the investigation that day were Investigating Officer Dadaram Nonaria and Superintendent of Police Mahesh Mishra. However, the state police made a crucial mistake. They failed to cordon off the crime scene and did not ask all of the additional people to leave immediately. Many people were still roaming in the apartment freely. Additionally, around 8 a.m., a large number of reporters and media persons arrived at the apartment, having heard about the murder that had taken place in the affluent neighborhood. In a shocking display of negligence, the police failed to keep even the media off the property, and they too were present in the apartment when the forensic team later arrived. According to the CBI team, 90% of the evidence at the crime scene was destroyed due to the state police's failure to follow proper procedure in securing it. The fact that this case remains unsolved even today can, in some part, be blamed on these actions. Arushi's room was where the forensic team was able to gather the most evidence, as this room had not been disturbed by the outsiders and press as much as the rest of the house. Arushi's body was found lying on the bed, covered with a white flannel blanket, and her own school bag had been used to cover her face. There was blood found on her pillow, the bed, the walls, the floor, and the bedroom door. However, no blood was found on the stuffed toys, the school bag, or the pink pillow that were all on her bed. All these items lay within range of the blood splatter area, but had no bloodstains on them, indicating they were placed on the bed after her murder, probably by her killer. Her bed sheet was laid out smoothly, showing no signs of struggle. A circular watermark was found below her pelvic area on the sheet, but her visibly untied pajamas did not have any such wet patch. This indicates that the pajamas were likely pulled up after her body was wiped clean. As the forensics team scoured the house for any possible evidence, the police collected statements from the parents, as well as some of the other individuals present in the house. In his statement, Rajesh adamantly blamed Hemraj for the murder. He even went so far as to tell the police to stop wasting time in the apartment and offered them 25,000 rupees to rush to Hemraj's native village in Nepal. From his statement, and due to Hemraj being missing, the police believe that it was an open and shut case, as a senior officer at the team told the Talwars. Their theory at the time was that he'd consumed the whiskey from the bottle on the table, and then, in a drunken state, had tried to enter Arushi's room to assault her. When she resisted, he hit her with the blunt edge of his kukri, a traditional Nepali knife, before cutting her throat and escaping. The police announced a 20,000 rupee reward for anyone with useful information that could lead to Hemraj's capture. At around 8:30 a.m., Arushi's body was taken for an autopsy to see if any other evidence could be found. A part of Arushi's bloodstained mattress was cut out. And sent to the forensics lab, along with her pillow, bedsheet, and clothes. Vikas Sethi, a pharmacist who worked with the Talwars, later stated that he, along with 3 other individuals, had wanted to dump the remaining part of the mattress on the terrace, but found it locked. When they asked Rajesh for the key to the terrace, he disappeared for a long time and then later told them he could not find the key. As they did not want to break down the door, the men threw the mattress on the neighboring terrace. Arushi's body returned home at 1 p.m. on May 16th. The body was brought home and laid on ice slabs in the living room. It was taken for cremation at 4 p.m. on the same day after the police confirmed that the body was not needed for any further examination. According to the Talwars, who were later accused of being in a hurry to cremate the body, it was decomposing fast, and the family elders were pushing for cremation.
Hi, no, my name is Gloria Garcia. I'm in the Bronx, in the south, very tip of the Bronx. But I have very strong legs and a strong will, so I go to and fro. But my favorite park and my favorite alliance at the moment is with Bronx River Alliance, because they service a lot of different parks, regardless of who's running it, and they have like this general like, hey, let's get things done feel about them. And yeah, and thank you for having me. Sure, I'd like to pop it on over to Mr. Frankie Lazio.
The police later also said that the Talwar staff were very hasty in cleaning Arushi's room. In the Talwar's defense, their pharmacist, Vikas Sethi, told the court that he had received permission to clean the house from the police personnel and a lady constable present at the crime scene. According to the CBI, when the post-mortem report was being written, between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. on May 16th, a series of telephone conversations took place between Dinesh Talwar, Dr. Sushil Chowdhury, Dinesh's friend and the chairman of the Eye Care Eye Hospital, and KK Gautam, retired deputy superintendent of police. KK Gautam, while deposing at the CBI court later in 2012, stated that Chowdhury had requested that he get any references to a sexual assault removed from the post-mortem report, but he refused to oblige. At the end of the day on May 16th, the police were sure that Hemraj was the murderer and believed that if they found him, they would have their man. They therefore neglected to look deeper into certain matters that they should have examined more closely. The next day, on May 17th, the Talwars left for Haridwar to immerse Arushi's ashes in the Ganges River as per the Hindu custom. While they were gone, visitors continued to pour into their household, which was being managed by Dinesh, to offer their condolences. One of these visitors was retired police officer KK Gautam, who had been asked by one of the couple's friends to come to the house. When he arrived at the house, Gautam examined the rooms of Arushi and Hemraj. He was then shown the bloodstains on the terrace door handle by Dinesh. Dinesh asked him if he could get the terrace door unlocked. Gautam then called SP, Superintendent of Police, Mahesh Mishra, who was in charge of the investigation, and told him that the lock needed to be broken. Mishra promised that he'd pay a visit to the crime scene himself, and in the meantime, sent the station officer, Dadaram Nonaria, to the apartment. The key to the terrace was still missing. In the end, Dadaram Nonaria broke the lock, and the group went onto the terrace for the first time since the murder. The first thing they saw were the bloody track marks, as if a body had been dragged across the terrace. Then, to their horror, they saw a body lying in a pool of blood. It had been there for so long that it was no longer recognizable in its advanced stage of decomposition. They also found a smudged bloody handprint on the wall of the terrace and a bloody footprint from a size 8 or 9 shoe. A double bed cover had been draped across the iron grille that separated the Talwar's terrace from the neighboring terrace, where Arushi's mattress had been dumped the previous day. Dinesh Talwar couldn't identify the body, so he called Rajesh and Nupur, who were on their way to Haridwar, and asked them to come home. When the couple returned to the home, Nupur didn't enter the house. Instead, she sat in the car with Arushi's ashes, as she considered it inauspicious to take the ashes inside. Rajesh was the one who went upstairs to identify the body. He told the police that he couldn't be sure that the body was that of Hemraj due to the injuries and the decomposition. Rajesh and Nupur then resumed their journey to Haridwar to immerse their daughter's ashes. Later, a friend of Hemraj identified the body as his. An autopsy of Hemraj's body was conducted that night by Dr. Naresh Raj. Not much information is available about Hemraj himself, except that he was from the Darapani village in the Agarakanchi district of Nepal and had been recommended to the Talwars by a friend of his. He regularly sent back money to his family in Nepal from his earnings. The discovery of Hemraj's body greatly embarrassed the police, as they had initially focused their attention solely on him as the murderer. The police were also criticized for other investigative blunders, such as not cordoning off the crime scene. The investigating officer, Dadaram Nonaria, was transferred on May 17th. The next day, Superintendent of Police Mahesh Mishra was also transferred. After this, the angle of the investigation drastically changed. The autopsies conducted on both Arushi and Hemraj presented police with new evidence which they could use to form theories as a part of their investigations. The autopsy on Arushi found that the cause of death for her was not the slitting of the throat, but rather the blow to her head by a blunt object that had killed her before her throat was cut. The blunt injury was on Arushi's forehead above the left eye. The blow caused a deep cut around 1.5 inches by 1 inch and a blood clot about 3 inches by 3/4 of an inch in her brain. The incision on Arushi's neck measured 5.5 inches by 2.25 inches. Her blood drained from the neck wounds, but there was no arterial spurting, which indicated that these wounds were inflicted on her after the blunt injuries had already stopped her heart. The 2008 post-mortem report of Arushi was written by Dr. Sunil Daur. In it, he said that Arushi's genital area had nothing abnormal detected, thus sexual assault was ruled out as a possibility. But at the same time, he also noted the presence of a whitish discharge at her vagina. The sample was sent for examination at the local district hospital, which reported an absence of C. However, when this vaginal swab sample was sent to CBI's forensic labs, it was suspected to have been tampered with. In a shocking discovery, it was discovered later that Arushi's vaginal swabs that were sent to be tested at the Center for DNA, Fingerprinting and Diagnostics in Hyderabad did not match her blood samples, which basically meant that the swabs did not belong to her. The CBI conducted a raid on the Noida District Hospital, only to find that Arushi's original medical file, her pathology reports, and autopsy findings were all missing, thus ensuring that vital clues that could have led to the murderer or murderers were lost forever. The CBI could not establish whether the sample was switched in the hospital or at the police station. Later in 2012, Dr. Daur gave a different statement, saying that Arushi's privates were extraordinarily dilated, although they showed no signs of sexual assault. He also stated that her vaginal orifice was unduly large. The mouth of her cervix was visible, and the whitish discharge was only in the vagina, where it should have spread to the entire area. He said he did not mention these observations in his original report because they were subjective findings, and because the findings were non-specific and were very strange. He added that the wide vaginal opening could only have formed if someone manipulated it while the rigor mortis was setting in. He therefore concluded that Arushi's private parts appeared to have been cleaned after she died. These findings, along with the alleged tampering of the samples, would appear as if someone wanted to erase evidence that could have pointed towards sexual assault. Unfortunately, the police were never able to determine whether this evidence was in fact legitimate or who had tampered with the samples. Hemraj's body provided much less evidence upon autopsy, mainly due to the state of decomposition. His body had been found almost 2 days after he'd been killed. However, from an analysis of the terrace and the rest of the apartment, police were able to determine that his blood was only present on the terrace. This indicated that he had been killed there. But even with that, the drag marks on the terrace were consistent with what would have been made by a body being dragged on a bedsheet. So again, the police could not be sure of this. Unlike Arushi's body, which was found with undigested food in her stomach, Hemraj had just 25 milliliters of liquid in his, indicating that he did not have dinner. This evidence was backed up by the fact that his dinner was found untouched in the kitchen on the morning of May 16th. The results of both autopsies stated that the time of death for both victims was between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. on May 16th. Therefore, the fact that Hemraj's dinner was untouched was surprising, as usually he would have eaten before this time and had, indeed, served himself around 10:30 p.m. the previous night. Why had he not eaten when he regularly did? Amongst various other clues, one major thing that perplexed investigators was the doors and the keys. The door to Hemraj's room was locked from the inside. The keys to the main entrance were also found in his room. The duplicate set of keys was with Rajesh and Nupur in their bedroom. In this scenario, the only way the keys could have been found inside Hemraj's room after the mesh door was locked from the outside was if the keys were brought in through Hemraj's room and then the key was locked from the inside. Since Hemraj and Arushi were both murdered, this allowed for only three possibilities. 1. Either one or both of the Talwars were involved in the murder. 2. Either one or both of them allowed the murderer or murderers to exit and then collected the keys from them. Or 3. There was another set of keys that so far had not been mentioned by anyone related to the case. Another strange piece of evidence the police uncovered was when they went through Arushi's phone records. In the 2 weeks prior to her murder, her last recorded usage of her phone on each night was never earlier than 11:20 p.m. In fact, on most nights, her last recorded usage was well past midnight. However, on the night of her murder, she last used her phone at 9:10 p.m. Why did she not use it again on this particular night? Was she aware that something was going to happen? We can only speculate. The whiskey bottle that was found on the dining room table in the morning had been removed from a concealed bar that the Talwars had in the living area. The fact that the bar was hidden meant that whoever removed it knew the house well. The bottle was covered with bloodstains of both Arushi and Hemraj, but sadly, no fingerprints could be recovered from it. Otherwise, it could have been a key piece of evidence into the investigation. From the details mentioned up until now, it must already be clear just how complex and convoluted this case was. Beginning with a lack of uncontaminated evidence, to the tampering of what little was available, the authorities investigating had an uphill battle from the very beginning. Add to that the fact that the case received widespread media coverage. The press were ruthless in bringing up accusations against everyone involved, even the deceased. The case quickly spun out of control. Over the next few years, the case would be investigated by multiple teams from different agencies, but none would be able to come up with a clear conclusion as to who had done this. In the first few days,
Welcome, Miss Hodges. I believe we're the only two in the Bronx. You're all the way up there, and I'm all the way down here, but hi.
days after Hemraj's body was discovered, police suspected the Talwar's former domestic help, Vishnu Sharma, was behind the murders. He was replaced by Hemraj, who he himself had recommended to the Talwars. Police believed he'd killed him for taking his job, and Arushi may have been killed for being a witness. They named him as a suspect on May 19th and took him into custody, but lacked any tangible evidence to connect him to the murders. His alibi was established, and it was confirmed that he was in Nepal at the time the murders took place. He was released from police custody, and investigators were again at square one, scrambling for new leads.
Some days are long, some nights never end. I mark the fleeting seconds glide, I pray to the coming wind. And time flies never
On May 21st, Delhi police joined the UP police in the investigation. By this time, the police, as well as the media, had begun to suspect foul play on the parents' part for multiple reasons. This included the fact that Arushi's bedroom was right next to her parents', yet they claimed to have slept through the murders without hearing any noise. Another reason was that Arushi's room was generally locked from the inside, and the only key to it was by Nupur's bedside. Yet the morning after the murder, the key was in the living room and they had no answer as to how it got there. Rajesh encouraging the police to pursue Hemraj before his body was discovered was thought to be a diversionary tactic by the police and only increased their suspicions. The fact he ignored the police's request for the key to the terrace door only added to this. Arushi's body and the crime scene in her bedroom had been cleaned, with her stuffed toys being placed on her bed and her bag being placed over her head after she was killed. The police could not find any motive for an outsider to have done this. And finally, the phone calls Rajesh's brother Dinesh had made to try and remove all mentions of sexual assault from the autopsy report also raised suspicions. All of these reasons gave the police cause to suspect the Talwars, and they were about to be given one more that led them to arrest Rajesh. They were told by one of his employees that he was allegedly having an affair with Anita Durrani, the wife of the dentist couple that the Talwars shared their clinic with. Inspector General Gurdarshan Singh, who was leading the investigation at this time, speculated on scenarios that could have led to the murders. His theory was that Hemraj knew about the alleged affair and was blackmailing Rajesh. Rajesh took Hemraj to the terrace on the pretext of discussing the issue, but ended up killing him. Arushi was a witness to this act and also objected to her father's affair, and she was killed to ensure her silence. Another theory he floated at the time was that Arushi was aware of her father's affair and confided in Hemraj, and may have even entered a relationship with him. On the night of the murder, Rajesh had entered Arushi's room late at night, where he found Arushi and Hemraj in an objectionable, though not compromising position. Seeing this, he took Hemraj to the terrace and killed him, and then came back downstairs. He then drank the whiskey in the bottle found on the table, and then, in a drunken state, killed his daughter. On May 23rd, Rajesh and Nupur were taken to the police lines area, where they were separated. When Nupur was kept in a room with a female constable, Rajesh was arrested and taken to a local magistrate, and subsequently to Dasna jail. Rajesh later claimed that the magistrate did not allow him to make any phone calls, and police threatened him into signing a confession on the way to the jail. Since it was Friday, Rajesh could not apply for bail until Monday. He had to spend the weekend in jail. He later stated that the police again threatened him to sign the confession while he was in their custody. After this, public opinion began to turn against the Talwars. Many of their friends began to avoid them. The Fortis Hospital fired Rajesh from his position as head of the dental department. However, the members of the Indian Dental Association and former patients professed their belief in Rajesh's innocence. Additionally, Arushi's friends and relatives were enraged by the character assassination taking place against the Talwars, as well as the deceased Arushi. Their names were being dragged through the mud by the press, as well as by police authorities, who were making claims without any evidence. Renuka Chowdhury, the Minister for Women and Child Development, demanded the suspension of Inspector General Singh for the accusations he had made against Arushi without any proof. Singh was transferred a month later. On May 31st, the case was transferred to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, per the request of the Talwars, who stated that the police were trying to frame them to cover up the fact that they'd botched the investigation. In June, the CBI started investigating the case under Joint Director Arun Kumar. The Talwars provided counter-arguments against the points that had led them to being suspects. They said that both rooms had the air conditioner on since it was a hot summer night, and the noise from these units was the reason they were able to sleep through the murders. Nupur stated she may have left the key to Arushi's room in the door when she went to turn on the Wi-Fi router the previous night, which could be how the murderer entered the room. Rajesh also stated that he urged the police to pursue Hemraj because, being missing, he was the obvious suspect. He also claimed to not remember the police asking him for the keys to the terrace door. Rajesh's brother denied asking KK Gautam to use his find any record of him making calls to the post-mortem house. Since the crime scene was compromised and evidence was lacking, the CBI turned to polygraph and brain mapping tests. Both Rajesh and Newport took and passed 2 polygraphs and a brain mapping test. No evidence of deception on their part was found.
Subjected to polygraph test twice. Again, in the first polygraph test remained inconclusive. There was no conclusion drawn. And in the second polygraph test, no deception has been found in her responses.
Triple Paste Diaper Rash Ointment is your tried and true solution for diaper rash, trusted by healthcare professionals and parents for over 50 years. I'm a childbirth educator and doula, and I work with expecting parents all the time, and this is the diaper cream that I recommend. Triple Paste not only treats diaper rash, but it prevents it in the first place. Most importantly, it brings relief to babies suffering from diaper rash. And a happy baby means a happy parent.
Following
No. Hi, can you hear me? No, it's okay. All the more the merrier, as they would say. Can you hear me? Okay. How are you? Okay, so what would you like to see most change in your area? Hmm. Hmm. Oh, okay. Have you thought of hosting events? Well, maybe if you incentivize them with some kind of, if not a raffle or a reward or some kind of acknowledgement for their participation, I find that works very well. Ah, right. Hmm. I find that before and after pictures work very well. Hmm. Right. Very true. Well, you are at far greater advantage regionally than I am. I'm at the very tip, at the southern point of the Bronx, Region 2, which is supposed to be one of the super flood zones on both sides. And I too find finding help or asking others or to share the sense of urgency, because as you stated, if 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 some people are not aware of certain aspects or functions or cost of things, then they're not going to be able to, like you said, see your vision. But maybe there's other ways that you can introduce that vision to them. You know, And so do you participate in the garden or no? Okay, your garden in the sky. Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay. Awesome. So you've heard of Bronx River Alliance? Yeah, the Greenway. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, all of the herbs are free for the community, which is great, because every penny that we can save is always a penny we can put somewhere else. You know, not that I save pennies, I personally find them almost worthless, because it takes 3 pennies to make one, as far as they as far as they say. So what brought you to this webinar? Were you looking for ideas or? Well, I believe we are, because I'm definitely an active participant of the New York City Parks Super Stewards, and I did the team captain training. Yeah, and I also participate. Yeah, that's definitely on their website. There's that, and then there's also NYC Trees, which is also part of NYC Parks, and you can actually log your participation and your street care. So it's great, because if you ever need somebody to, or if you ever need to show that you've been active, because what I find is, or what they say, today I just had a webinar with Give Butter, and they're like a promotional fundraising platform, and they said that sometimes you're not going to get the funding up front. So sometimes people need to see you sweat, and they need to see you doing, not just saying like, oh, this is what we need, so like, stuff like that. But so definitely take down my number, so that if you want, because I like I stated earlier, I have very strong legs and a strong will. So I used to live on Burke and Barnes. It's still a great distance from you, but not too far off. I used to take my daughter to the Barnes and Noble before they shut down. Yes, ma'am. So just to show you how far back, I was also affiliated with the Bronx River Alliance community. But I moved from there, so I ended up going through the homeless shelter and everything. So I'm finding myself um, uh, seeing all this urgent need, like all these people who are saying we need jobs. But Theodore Roosevelt said, dig a hole, right? Pay somebody to dig a hole, and then pay somebody else to fill it up. If it's gonna teach a man or feed a family for a week or two, why not? And it's really our responsibility because it's our trash, right? Sometimes when I first started doing the super stewardess, not just around here, anywhere, when they first see you and they're not familiarized with you, they're like, oh, she's crazy because you're wearing all these bright colors, because you always want to be seen especially when you're doing the work by yourself sometimes, because you want people to notice you, what you're doing. So yeah, but then after a while, when they start to see other things like, oh, okay, this is why she throws water onto the steps in the morning, because at night, vagrants come and they do their habits, and if it's raining outside, they stand under the shed. So rather than having my neighbors go outside in the morning just before they go off to work and see residual substance abuse items, I just clear the debris off. Exactly. But I don't go out there and say, where's my reward, right? Because we just do things because we're supposed to be looking out after each other. I do believe we are our brother's keeper. I mean, we can never, no man could ever build a bridge by himself. He needs brethren. So before we leave, can I send you my cell phone number and my email? Awesome. I also host a crochet class for free at a Bronx Community Center, which is another thing that you can do too, to bring advocacy to you, or to bring more volunteers to you, because that's all you really need is a couple of go-getters. If you have 3 or 4 go-getters, I feel like those are better than 25 of what do you have for free? Okay, so let me see. I'm gonna how do we do it? Do I send it to you at a personal? Yeah, yes, I found it. Yeah, it does. It allows it for personal. I'm gonna send it to you right now. Yeah, because the other ladies are also they're from everywhere else, and as you stated, it is ironic that, just as you stated, like, because you're not in the neighborhood, you can't understand what is needed, right? And I understand that we cannot put ourselves in physical jeopardy or in harm's way, basically. So I always do things early in the morning. I try to tell everybody where I'm at and stuff like that. I'm about to send it. I'm just including my email. Sorry, just give me 1 more second. Okay. No, yes. Okay. Okay. Can you send me their information so I can look it up when I get a chance? And Mrs. Hodges, there's also, like, say if you were to participate, let me see if I could send it to you. I'm gonna send you a flyer that I made for an organization that I told you that I teach crocheting, and I'm just starting. In all honesty, it's not like I've been doing it for years, but I'm really antsy about doing this because I feel like we need to teach each other more than what we do, because we're so critical for each other, towards each other. I don't know if you get that air sometimes. Oh, just give me. I'm gonna. Carol Farms. Well, just put it in the chat even when we leave, okay? I sent you my flyer, so you have my information there. Okay. Awesome. Yay. Welcome back, everyone. Hi. Hi, Miss Rogers. We should be. Oh. Oh.
Doing this, the CBI began to look into other possible leads and suspects.
I'm gonna mute this. I'm sorry.
In the next phase of the investigation,
It's because I'm on the first floor and everybody can hear anything and everything we say. So that's why I always have like some noise in the background. I'm sorry.
the claims about Rajesh's extramarital affair and
But that's why I have these. See, that's why I use this.
were both planted by Krishna Tatarai, an assistant
Thank
at the
you.
Talwar's dental clinic. Rajesh stated that 2 days prior to the murders, he'd scolded Tatarai for making an incorrect dental cast. This was supported by Anita Durrani. Rajesh's driver, Umesh Sharma, stated that he'd heard Tatarai and Hemorrhage talking loudly in Nepali while in the car. When he inquired as to what they were talking about, Tatarai told him that he would deal with Rajesh. On June 7th, Tatarai was detained by the CBI. The CBI team searched his house, where they found a blood-stained pillow cover and kukri knife. He then underwent a number of tests, including a polygraph test and a narco-analysis test. In a narco test, the subject is given narcotics which put them in a semi-conscious state, in which their ability to lie is greatly hindered. However, these tests are not admissible as evidence in court, as they're not always reliable. During his narco test, Tatarai spoke of a second murderer. Based on this, the CBI began investigating his friend Rajkumar, who was the domestic help for the Duranis, the couple that ran the clinic alongside the Talwars. Between June 23rd and 26th, Rajkumar was also subjected to a number of the same tests as Tatarai. He was then arrested on suspicion on June 27th. On June 30th, Vijay Mandal, another friend of Tatarai, was reported as a suspect in the media. Mandal was a driver and domestic help for Talwar's neighbor, Punish Tandon. Hemraj, Tatarai, and Rajkumar were all of Nepali origin and had been recruited through Vishnu, the ex-servant of the Talwars, who was the initial suspect in the case. On July 9th, Rajkumar was put through a second narco-analysis test, and the next day the media reported that he had confessed to the murders. On July 11th, Vijay Mandal, who was already being investigated, was also arrested. That same day, lead investigator Arun Kumar gave a press conference in which he said the case was still unsolved, but it seemed like Tatarai, Rajkumar, and Mandal were the prime suspects based on the narco tests. However, the narco tests on their own were not enough for conviction, as there were many differences between the statements the men had given during their respective tests. Tatarai himself had given 3 different versions of the story. Based on the statements of the men, the CBI built this timeline of events. Hemraj had invited all 3 to his quarters that night, and the men arrived around midnight. The four men started drinking beer. Tadarai spoke of his humiliation by Rajesh Talwar and expressed his desire to take revenge. Arushi's door was surprisingly unlocked that night. But from this point, each statement was different in what they said had happened. Here's what the men said. In Rajkumar's version, Arushi threatened to expose what the suspect said about her father, so Tadarai took out his kukri and killed her. Then, when the suspects planned to flee, Hemraj got cold feet and threatened to expose them. Tadarai and Rajkumar then dragged Hemraj to the terrace and killed him. After they destroyed the mobile phones of Arushi and Hemraj. In Tadarai's first version of events, he stated that he and Rajkumar had entered Arushi's room and tried to sexually assault her, and when she resisted, Tadarai himself took out his kukri and killed her. They then dragged Hemraj to the terrace and killed him because he was a witness. In Tadarai's second version of events, he stated that it was Rajkumar and Mandal who entered Arushi's room and tried to assault her. When she resisted, Mandal hit her on the head and Rajkumar slit his throat with a kukri. The three of them then took Hemraj to the terrace and killed him before escaping off the roof after locking the terrace door. In Tadarai's third version of events, he stated that Rajkumar entered and tried to assault Arushi while he and Mandal followed him. When she resisted, Tadarai killed her with his kukri. Hemraj then got scared and threatened to tell the Talwars, so the three men took him to the terrace and killed him. The three of them then returned downstairs and tried to enter the Talwars' room, but found it locked. While these statements do perhaps indicate some form of guilt, the CBI could not use them as evidence and eventually had to release all three men for a number of reasons. Firstly, all three men had alibis. Tadarai's family and landlord confirmed that he was at home the night of the murders. Vijay Mandal's employer also confirmed that he was in his garage the night the murders took place. Rajkumar was the only one whose alibi was only confirmed till 12:30 a.m. on the night of the murders. Secondly, no physical evidence could be found tying the men to the scene of the crime. Their fingerprints did not match any lifted from the scene, and the bloody kukri found in Tadarai's room turned out to be animal blood, not human. And finally, the narco tests alone were not considered sufficient evidence to be used for conviction, as they were inadmissible in court. Additionally, Rajkumar's lawyer, Naresh Yadav, approached the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC, stating that the three men had been tortured by the CBI officers during the investigation. In January 2009, the CBI announced that they were ready to file charges against Tadarai, Rajkumar, and Mandal. However, in the absence of any hard evidence, they could not do so.
With our servers designed for AI, you can revolutionize the way you do business. Power your workloads and empower innovation at any scale. We meet you where you are and take you where you want to go.
Arun Kumar's time at the CBI ended in September 2009. A new CBI team was given the case that same month. This new team was headed by the SP, Superintendent of Police, Neelab Kishore. An additional SP, AGL Call, served as the investigating officer. The new CBI team looked at the entire crime again with fresh eyes. For them, the parents were once again the prime suspects. Apart from the oddities discovered in the previous investigation into the couple, they also found some additional points of interest. Both doctors who conducted the autopsies on Arushi and Hemraj gave new statements containing new information.
Hi. Oh, just give me 1 second. I'll get the door and I'll be right back. Yes, we definitely are. What we were discussing was our trying to get our communities more involved. Mrs. Hodges' focus was on trying to get more of her youth because she says she's in the educational field and it's hard to get people to agree on their methods of getting things done. And I told her it's pretty much the same here, except that my thing is, like her, I'm also looking for a stronger team, a core team, and we agreed that 3 good, hardworking people, and maybe even 4, were better than 25 people that were just interested to see what they can get out of the event, rather than actually trying to help the overall mission. So we were discussing other ideas. Like I asked her if she could explore other ways of maybe attracting the youth to what she's doing by maybe providing incentives or free gear or some kind of promotional activity, or maybe even a gift certificate. On my behalf, what I have done is I expanded my network, and I actually got in contact with a couple of community centers where they accept offerings. So I found like KFC, I got a lot of no's, but just last week I finally got a yes, and it's endorsed by Time Bank. I don't know if anybody's familiarized with that, but I'll be collaborating with Bronx Hype, which is a community-based center. It's for socially economically disadvantaged center, strategically placed in Hunts Point. But aside from healing from the inside, I feel like if we can get more of our community members to look at this endeavor as not just cleaning up after yourself, because pretty much that's what we'd be doing, but also as a possibility for employment, as me and Mrs. Hodges had discussed. Frederick Theodore Roosevelt, I believe, he said, dig a hole, pay a man to dig a hole, and pay another man to fill the hole. If that's what it takes to keep our nation's rotational ball or working ball, or however you want to look at it, keeping our human resources faculty, especially those that have served us for hundreds of years. I'm strategically, Mrs. Hodges finds herself, as she mentioned, like sometimes a little harder to explain your fishbowl situation when the other people are not necessarily in it. So it's almost the same, because I draw parallels with how she drew a parallel with how it is with her trying to explain to other core members of the community how basically how the programs would impact the community that they're actually be servicing, in contrast to her acquaintances or her coworkers, which normally don't live in the impact zone or the economically disadvantaged zone, such as where I currently find myself. I told Mrs. Hodges that I used to reside in Barnes, between Burke and Barnes, which is not too far off, maybe 3-mile difference from where she's at right now. But right now I find myself in a world of difference, and instead of saying like, oh, boo-hoo, it's me, which a lot of us do have a tendency of doing, I'm trying to see if maybe I could establish some kind of truthful, honest, accountable relationships with, maybe if I can find 2 or 3 more people, we can actually do things. So I also told Mrs. Hodges maybe what she can do as an incentive is to provide an example. I find that before and afters work really well, even if it's just as a suggestion. And thank you all for hearing me out. Sorry. Yeah. Yay! You guys will be visiting. See, because my oh wowsies are real, baby. Oh wowsies.
Information. Dr. Door stated that Arushi's hymen was ruptured and her private parts appeared to have been cleaned. Dr. Naresh Raj stated that hemorrhage's swollen private parts indicated the possibility of sexual intercourse. In October 2009, the CBI conducted another analysis of the crime scene based on the photographs that had been taken, and the analysis supported the theory that the crime scene had been cleaned and staged after the murders. Most importantly, the new team identified the weapon that had been used to inflict the blunt injuries as a golf club. Specifically, one of the clubs in the set owned by Rajesh himself. On October 29, 2009, the CBI asked Rajesh to send his golf set to them, and he complied the very next day, sending them over. The CBI later stated that the dimensions of the golf club bearing number 5 were identical to the dimensions of the injuries on the heads of both victims. It seemed they had found their murder weapon. But because it was over a year later, no evidence was found on the club to link it to the murders. Nilab Kishore once again questioned the Talwars in his Dehradun office.
You know, the
on
pruner
18th of
thing, there you have, I believe you have to pay $100 is a fee, which is not much
stating that Arushi had
for
been
pruning.
killed by Rajesh in an honor killing. This article quoted unnamed sources in the CBI. On July 21st, Rajesh asked the court to pass an order of restraint against the unethical and misleading information being published by the print media outlets. On December 29, 2010, the CBI filed a closure report, recommending that the case be closed due to insufficient evidence, but naming Rajesh as the sole suspect. In the report, they stated that the parents were the only people who had a reason and ability to clean up the crime scene. They also officially cleared Tadarai, Rajkumar, and Mandal, stating that all three had alibis, and there was no evidence linking them to the crime. They ruled out any other outside intruders, as there were no signs of forced entry, and an intruder would have no reason to clean up the crime scene and hide Hemorrhage's body. Finally, they stated the complete lack of physical evidence they had found at the crime scene as insufficient to continue the investigation. It was recommended that the case be closed for good. In January 2011, the Talwars filed a petition protesting the closure of the case with Rajesh as the sole suspect. However, their petition was rejected by the magistrate.
tons of trash and itty bitty space. Sorry guys, I have to go.